The more you look at this loss against Arkansas, it's just not getting any better, people.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day, especially right now, because it's probably not the easiest thing to start your day with as we continue to recap Auburn's devastating loss to Arkansas, that 24-14 loss on Saturday. Joining me as he does every Monday, the Lindsay Crosby of auburndaily.com, as well as other places around the web. Lindsay, we'll talk about what we should expect moving forward. Are things actually going to change, as well as a former Hugh Freeze coach quarterback? What specifically is going to happen with some of the things that he, I guess, called out Coach Freeze on? Is there any merit to it? But the more you look at this loss, the more frustrating it is, because you could look at all of these things and say, but if. And some of them are going to be more valid than others. But the thing that's frustrating about all of this is we shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to beat the teams that you've lost to so far this year. And this whole, you got to be patient for year 3. It's only going to go so far, Lindsay.
The wild thing to me is Sam Pittman. This time last year, you beat them 40-10 at home. There was questions about whether or not he would lose his job.
Yeah.
And now
Sam
it's
Pittman.
gone the Sam Pittman, yeah, not Hugh Freeze. And now it's gone the other direction. And so I think the frustrating thing here now is both of these losses to Arkansas and to Cal are teams that you beat on the road last season. And then those games not only were closer in the rematches at home, but you lost them both and looked significantly worse than you did last year. I mean, I'm not saying the Cal trip was a good game last year, but you looked worse this year. You won, and you looked worse against them this year in a loss at home. And so it's frustrating to be at that point when it would make sense if it was flopped. You lost to them in year 1 and you turned around and beat them in year 2. And it's just, it shouldn't be like this. We should not be having these conversations at this point in year 2.
No, you're certainly right about that. And this is just a team that you went out and did so much to add to the offense, and it's worse than it was a year ago. Not from a yardage standpoint, and when you're not turning the football over, it's fine. But you can't just brush past that. You can't brush past when they're not throwing picks and turning the ball over, it looks fine, which is true to some extent. But in your 2 biggest games, you've turned it over. Just an ungodly amount of times. And you can say everything you want about, hey, we're building this program the right way. But at some point, you've got to coach guys to where, hey, you've got to take care of the football. You can be upset at the podium or at a microphone when you're going into halftime, whether it's the radio broadcast or the TV broadcast, and you got to find a quarterback that can take care of the football and running backs that can't fumble it. Sure, you have every right to be upset, but at this point into your tenure, that shouldn't be you should have an answer for that. If you would have thought that this was the case, you should have gotten more quarterbacks via the portal up to this point. You can blame other folks, and that's fine. And it's not entirely on Freeze. But when it's this big of a problem this far into the season, and in your 2 biggest games, you turn it over like crazy, it is on the head coach.
Yeah. And being minus 14 in turnover differential is
what?
Atrocious.
What is that?
You forced 3, 2 of them came against Arkansas, but you've turned it over 17 times. And 2 of those teams you played were some of the worst defenses in FBS. And it's still, minus 14 in turnover differential. And that's, I think the turnovers is one of the most frustrating parts of this, because I know you can't just ignore them, but you can imagine if even 5 turnovers in each game was 1 or 2, how much different the offense would look because you dominated the box score in yards per carry. I mean, in total yard, all that stuff, except you turn the ball over 3 times on the plus side of the field, including one right there by the goal line.
It's insane. I mean, you have almost 100 yards more, like 97 more total yards. And there were several drives where you moved the ball. But yeah, like you said, when you're in a scoring situation, you turn the football over. And like, sure, some of those were questionable calls that I think should have been overturned, but like, it doesn't matter. Like, you can't be in that situation. And when the number is that large, like you said, turning it over 17 times, it's like, we're not halfway through the season yet, Lindsay. Like, this is just an alarming thing. And so, like, we talked about it when after Cal, where he's, all right, we're going to shorten or make the packages smaller that we take into games and all that, which maybe that's happening. I don't think there's any way for us to fully know that, but I assume that's happening because everybody said it. But to me, it almost makes you wonder, like, is there too much on the quarterbacks? Is there too much being asked of the quarterbacks? Because I do think it's odd how little Auburn is running the football. And I know you've got the weapons outside. I was talking to somebody earlier today. It's like, yeah, we've got the fast car in the driveway, but nobody drives stick. It's like, all right, you've got all these pieces out wide that you want to throw to, but if you don't have somebody that can get it to them, it doesn't matter. And the whole theory of, okay, if you surround Thorne with talent, he's going to be able to get the ball to him. And that's not the case. That's not the case, clearly, in these situations. However, Thorne was fine in the second half, 13 for 22. His one pick wasn't on him. Like, I don't want to pick on Thorne too much because I actually think he was pretty decent in the second half there. But just the overall body of work, like culturally on offense, is just it's atrocious. To use Hugh Freeze's word, it's sickening.
Can I go back just a second to Payton Thorne in the second half? Because his overall numbers, 13-22, 213, 2 touchdowns, that's great. Before the final 7 passes on that final drive when time was running out, he was 6 of 15. So I do think it is worth pointing out that it's not like Payton Thorne looked like Peyton Manning out there until that final drive.
Good point. But that may not even include the 4th down attempt to KLS where it was like a 5-yard pass and then it was a catch and run all the way in. I don't know how far out that was, but that may not even include that.
Yeah, more than half of his yards when he was 6 of 15 came on that giant coverage bust for a touchdown, which, I mean, KLS has been everything you thought he was going to be and more, but that's not
67 yards. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, KLS has been awesome. I hate that his production is being overshadowed by all this crap that we've got to talk about.
Yeah, but I mean, 11 turnovers. I believe it's 11 turnovers against Cal and Arkansas, and you lose by 20. It's just like 20 combined.
And people want to complain about the defense. It's insane to me. Yes, there were some really bad moments. No question. But I don't know how you watch that game, and I'm getting tweets about, oh my gosh, we're leaving things wide open underneath. And it's like, hold on. Like, that's your takeaway? Wait a second.
Okay. Oh, I will. The one thing about the defense that I think is appropriate to criticize, okay, is there were 13 different third downs for Arkansas where they had 8 yards or more to go.
Oh my gosh.
Auburn made 3 plays out of those 13. There was a K and Lee interception, there was a forced incompletion, and there was a sack. Every other time was it was either they converted, they converted, they got 7 yards on 3rd and 8 and then converted 4th down.
Right.
They got a big gain, a roughing the passer penalty, and pass interference, something like that. So there is a valid complaint there.
I get it.
But I think other than that, there's not a lot of other things to nitpick the defense about, especially when you consider you've been shorthanded in the secondary and then you lose Champ Anthony to an injury that was apparently so bad they wouldn't show it on ESPN.
Yeah, it must have been pretty bad. I was thinking the same thing there. But yeah, just with all these turnovers and the fact of the matter, like, Arkansas made it to the red zone 4 times and they scored 24 points. Like, if you told me that going into it, it's like, okay, well, hopefully we scored enough, but clearly not the case. Clearly not the case. All right, let's jump into, Hugh Freeze's former quarterback Bo Wallace, a year ago, he was praising his head coach. That was not the case this past weekend. Let's jump into some of that in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Lindsay, can you imagine? Can you imagine wagering anywhere than with our friends at FanDuel?
I would never do it anywhere else. FanDuel has all of my Auburn over on the win total money this season.
Yeah, they're going to probably keep it too. They're probably going to keep that. But you could start the season big with FanDuel. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets with FanDuel. You can get started today with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. All you have to do is place that first $5 bet. That's over at FanDuel.com. You can visit FanDuel today to check out all the props, odds, and lines. Thank you so much to FanDuel for sponsoring Locked On Auburn. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. The everydayers know that there are 2 episodes of Locked On Auburn each and every day. So be sure to check those out every morning and afternoon. All right, so Bo Wallace, who was Hugh Freeze's quarterback at Ole Miss, was very effective. In fact, that was one of the points that the pro Freeze camp made about saying, hey, this is what is so exciting about him as a head coach, is like Bo Wallace wasn't anything spectacular, but his production was pretty solid when he was playing for Coach Freeze. So he tweets this out after the game. I'm not going to read all of this, but it says, we're approaching that point where he's thrown so many quarterbacks under the bus that maybe no one wants to play for him. His offense helped me tremendously put numbers up when I blew my shoulder out, but why is it someone else's fault every time that there's a loss? But when there's a win, I watch the press conferences just to count how many times the word I is used. Appreciate what he did for me. My son wouldn't be playing for him, though. So I guess proper context of this is he defended him after the New Mexico State loss last year. People dug up those old tweets. I'm not going to read all of those, but he said, give him time. He's a great coach, yada, yada, yada. We have a total pivot here with what happened over the weekend. He went back and forth with a lot of folks. But to me, like, it's a little odd. It's a little strange where it's like, okay, like this is a pretty big difference from what we saw a year ago. I talked to several players Saturday night and throughout the day on Sunday. And I always ask, like, is everything fine, like within the locker room? And everybody believes in Freeze. Everybody still believes in Freeze. I asked that question. After the Cal loss to several players. I asked it over the weekend after the loss to Arkansas. And everybody seems to still believe in Freeze within that locker room. So I don't know if I'm fully buying what Bo Wallace is saying here, but it was an interesting statement nonetheless.
Either Bo Wallace became best friends with Payton Thorne over the summer and is just incredibly mad that Payton Thorne got benched for this game, or he tried to move up from the private high school that he works for in Tennessee and try to get a job with Auburn, and Auburn said no. I mean, I can't think of why you would, years after being removed from playing for Ole Miss, turn on a dime like that, unless either you are very close to Payton Thorne and you feel like he was done wrong by Hugh Freeze, or you're just jilted and angry. Something happened between you and him that made you angry at him personally. Because I understand his point of he thinks Hugh Freeze takes too much credit for wins and puts blame for the losses on the players. I just don't see it. We've heard Hugh Freeze talking. The thing we've said on the show is he is insanely transparent and just upfront with exactly how he feels all the time. We're so not used to that.
I'm not ever going to criticize that because I want coaches to be more honest than most are. And so like, I'm not going to like criticize Freeze from being too honest. Cause like a lot of times we're actually not getting coach speak. If he thinks if somebody was open and somebody missed them, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Normally it'd be like, yeah, we got to go back and look at the film and see what happens. It's like, cool. Like that was a candid answer. We actually know what you're thinking. I'm not going to criticize you for that. I don't think that would be fair for us to do. I've never watched a presser from Bo Wallace's point of view or any of Hugh Freeze's former players' point of view to count the number of times he says I after a win. I have no interest in doing that, but it does feel a little odd the whole, like, what did he want out of this? It's just a strange thing for me. Something else that he said in here, where was it? Do your research on his offenses, excluding his time at Liberty. Well, okay, that was like a long time ago, but okay. Look at the interceptions every quarterback he's had for him throws. At some point when it happens over and over every year, you look in the mirror, not at the players, to save face. This is interesting to me because, like, the offense he ran at Ole Miss and the offense he runs now, like, it is similar. And there are some questions about this. Like, I talked to somebody close to Travis Williams, T. Will, Auburn's former coach and linebacker. Now he's a DC at Arkansas. And, like, I do think there are flaws with the system that he runs. And Travis Williams' plan was to say, okay, when they have an RPO situation, you walk another guy up. And it's like, okay, that makes you check out of the run to throw it. And Arkansas wanted Auburn to throw it. And it worked. That was the gamble that they took, and it worked. Were there guys running open? Yes. But Arkansas rolled the dice and said, hey, we're going to trust that you can't find them. And it paid off. It paid off. I mean, there's nothing else to look at when it comes to that. So, like, is that on the quarterback? To some extent, yeah, I think so. But is Hugh Freeze asking too much of quarterbacks when he knows that they haven't been able to do it up to this point? I think so.
Maybe, yeah.
I think so. And to me, that's on the head coach.
I don't have the Ole Miss numbers, but I have the Liberty numbers. And
he does say excluding his time at Liberty. So I assume a lot of that was Malik Willis, and he was effective.
That's the thing. In interceptions, 116th in the country, 118th in the country in interceptions. The problem was there too. Auburn last year was 98th in the country. I haven't checked on this morning, but I would imagine it's probably towards the bottom in the entire country, interceptions now. So
I think they're like 113th in FBS. I got tagged in that earlier today. Yeah.
Nice. So, like, the interceptions, and again, have not gone back and looked at Ole Miss, but through Liberty, like, it's been a constant that the interceptions are there in this system. It's possible. We talked earlier in the year and some last season too about how some of the issues were Payton, Thorne, and the receivers not being on the same page with the option routes and what the receivers were supposed to adjust to do during the play. Yeah. It's entirely possible the system is a little bit complicated. There are NFL teams that don't use a lot of option routes because they don't want their players having to think during the play about what to do.
There's a lot of, now, if you run it to perfection, it's almost impossible to stop, right?
Yeah.
But if you can't run it, then we don't need to do that. I mean, there were so many times where, like, it's just like I was begging Auburn to run the football.
Yeah.
And when you go up there with the RPO, like, I get that the math says not to, but I just trust Jarquez Hunter. I trust Jarquez Hunter because he's been running against a loaded box ever since he got at Auburn. And he's been fine. He's been fine. So to me, my understanding based off of the folks that I've talked to within the program, that's what the calls were. That's what T. Will went in planning and what Arkansas did to try to stop Auburn. And sadly, it worked. And so do you adjust? Because, man, let me tell you what, like, I still don't think Arkansas's defense is that good. I don't think Cal's defense is anything to write home about. But I do think Oklahoma's is really freaking good. And they come to Jordan here on Saturday, and that's going to be concerning. That could be really, really concerning.
Yeah. Jarquez had a success rate of over 50%, meaning he got 60% of the yards he needed prior to the next down. I think the exception's third down. You have to get 100%. But he was successful in more than half of his runs using the advanced metric of what success is in modern football, even despite sometimes running into big boxes. Like, you need to run the ball more. I know that Hugh Freeze's history is call RPOs, we're going to explosive passing game and all of that. You've got to run the ball more because you have a guy, like you said, who has done it in those situations multiple seasons now. Let him eat.
Let him eat because he's hungry. You can tell. Like, you can tell he wants it. But on the other side of the coin, like 12 touches, like how many times do I want him touching the football every time? I mean, I think 15 is kind of my cap on that. Just because I mean, do you trust the guys behind him? I actually don't know. I don't know how much you can trust Damari Austin with the football right now. But Jeremiah Cobb, he only touched the ball once. Like, that seems low. That seems low to me. Like, I'm glad they got Malcolm Simmons the ball 5 times. That's great. I think that's exciting. KLS has been electric. 5 touches for him. Cam Coleman,
that's the
they
second
try to get it to him
game.
more, but it's like, if you're going to do that and not catch the football, and I know it's not the easiest catch in the world, but you didn't bring Cam Coleman in to make the easy catches. That's not what makes him special. So
yeah, there's been a tipped ball interception that was off of Cam Coleman's hands in both the Cal game and the Arkansas game. I love Cam Coleman. I'm not criticizing Cam Coleman. I'm saying that specifically can't happen.
Yeah.
That's not a good look. Because like you said, the dude's here to make those hard catches, and he's been that close and hasn't done it.
No, he hasn't done it. And so we'll see when he starts doing it on a more consistent basis. So what should we expect moving forward with this Auburn team? That's coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Lindsay, can you imagine going to an event that needs a ticket and you're like, and just not using the Game Time app to purchase those tickets?
I would never do that. All of my tickets that I purchase are through Game Time because it's great. They have the Game Time guarantee.
They do. The lowest price guarantee. Can you, when you buy tickets through an app, do you want to have to go to all the different apps to see which one's the least expensive?
Ideally, no. And
no, you just want to go to one place.
And I also hate having to go look at the map of the venue to see what my seat would look like if I buy that ticket. But Game Time takes care of that too.
Yes. There's no reason to buy tickets anywhere else. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Lindsay, when you look at what expectations need to be for this Auburn football team now, I guess there's two sides of the coin. I'm going to be optimistic first, then I think I'm going to be a realist second. The optimistic side of it is you find a way to only turn the ball over once or twice a game, or somehow fix turnovers altogether. Mm-hmm. And I think if you do that, I do think you're competitive in a lot of the remaining games. Do you win them? I don't know. But I don't think the defense is as bad as people are making it out to be. And I think if you actually put the defense in a good situation and the offense helps complement the defense, I think the defense could be even better. Crazy thought that maybe both sides of the football working together. That'd be crazy. That'd be super, super fun. But on the other side of it, the more realistic option is most of these players have shown us who they are, specifically the quarterback position. Maybe some receiver, maybe some defensive players, but as a whole, I still think the roster is okay. There are a few situations, and unfortunately, it's at important positions where it's okay, you've got to figure this out. You've got to figure it out. And we don't know who's starting, Hank or Payton. I would assume it's Payton if I had to guess. But to me, it's I just don't know how you change who these guys are at this point. And that stinks. And that's concerning. And I don't know what you're supposed to do.
Diagnosing the reason for the interceptions is not easy. Everybody says hey, fix interceptions. Not a super easy thing to say, but we can speculate, right? We can talk about the wide receiver quarterback relationship and having to diagnose on the field and things like that. I will say it does feel like the simple change to make that does raise the ceiling and the floor of this team is just cutting back on the interceptions. Auburn got the ball inside the Arkansas 40, 6 different times in that game. And they scored 14 points. Arkansas only made it inside Auburn's 47 times. And you held them to 24. And so it feels like you can manufacture offense enough to give yourself a chance. It's just ball security when you're down there. The Damari Allison fumble, all the interceptions. I don't know how you do that. However, is that more running the ball with, Jarquez and other guys who are not going to fumble as much? Is that not calling as many option routes? I don't know, but it feels like this is the opportunity to try something different. And if it doesn't work against Oklahoma, you have 2 weeks to figure it out before your next matchup.
We go to Georgia, then you get a bye week.
I'm sorry. Okay. Apologies.
But still,
yeah,
I mean, that's going to be tricky, right? Because like I don't think anybody's expecting to win in Georgia at this point, right?
No. It's on me.
Yeah, you got a bye week then. So it's like, what do you do in the bye week to like fix things? I'm sure you go back to basics, but then you go to a Missouri team that's like seems to be pretty good. I just
breaking the SEC schedule is hard.
I just don't see the path to a bowl game right now. And that's devastating. It's devastating.
So are you saying 6 wins? Like you don't see them getting to 6 wins, or you don't see them getting to 7 wins?
I don't see them getting to 6 wins. And I mean, tell me if that's like too negative, but I mean, let's go through this. Do they win against Oklahoma on Saturday? I'm not picking Auburn to beat Oklahoma. Are you?
Probably not. No.
Okay. At Georgia? No. We're looking for 4 wins here. We're looking for 4. So we're still at 2. At Missouri? No.
Number 11, Missouri. Feels like a no. Yeah.
So it's an early kickoff. Maybe you catch them if you figure something out. I don't see it.
Right.
At Kentucky at night?
Maybe. Feels
That's
like a
the most realistic one yet, right?
Yeah.
That's the most realistic one yet, but I'm still
giving them.
Yeah, as of right now, I'm saying no to that. Vandy at home. That becomes the most manageable one so far, right? Not super confident.
No, but that's
not super confident right now.
If you can win Kentucky and Vandy, right?
ULM, yes.
That's a win, yeah.
A&M at home. I'm not picking Auburn in that game right now.
And then Auburn
you go to the
on the road.
You go to the Iron Bowl.
God.
Sucks, dude. It's the worst.
That is rough. That is a little bit rougher than I expected it to be. Honestly.
Yeah, and it stinks because I mean, all summer we talked about how this was like the most manageable schedule for Auburn in recent memory. And it is.
LSU.
Yeah,
Ole Miss,
that is true. Like that is factually true. Now, the good news is it gets even more manageable next year, but goodness gracious, man, like there's not one game on the schedule outside of ULM that you can point at and say, yes, Auburn is winning that football game.
Which is tough. Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough. And if you start dropping some of these, it's just like, what does that belief look like? You can't let people that are being like, you can't let any sort of animosity or any sort of negative emotion fester in that locker room. Because once one guy says, yeah, I'm entering the portal in December, there's a chance that it gets a little contagious. And you got to figure that out.
Yeah.
You got to figure it out. And I just think if you're, what would Auburn be? 2-4 in the bye week. If you lose to Georgia and Oklahoma, you'd be 2-4. It's a tough situation to manage. It's a tough situation to manage. So we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. Lindsay, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball.
What a positive show. What a positive show and positive note to end on.
Speaking of positive, if you want Atlanta Braves coverage, bravestoday.com. It's a podcast and a Substack. MLB coverage, First Pitch is your show. And then again, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. What a positive show.
Yeah, please like the video for some reason. Please subscribe. We'll see you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.